And in this episode of Barrels and Barrels, episode 40, we're talking Peerless, small batch bourbon whiskey. Also breaking down what's going on in the AL West. Shohei Ohtani's injury, Clayton Kershaw making history, as do the Phillies. And what's going on in those wild cards, as well as with the Brewers, Phillies, as well as the Cubs. We'll talk that and more in Barrels and Barrels, episode 40, coming up.
This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, with your hosts, Brandon Spinner and Michael Burns.
And welcome into Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I am Brandon. That's Michael. We talk bourbon. We talk baseball. We like to say we talk high proof and high heat here at Barrels and Barrels. Michael Burns, happy Wednesday, almost to the end of August. How are you doing on this fine day of Wednesday, August the 30th?
I'm doing pretty good, Brandon. I'm enjoying the cooler weather. The popsicles don't melt as fast, and I'm excited to be planning out next week.
Yeah, next week we've got some special stuff coming up, and we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. So don't forget to stay tuned and stay tuned to us on YouTube. But this episode is brought to you by Whiskey Towers this week. If you haven't seen Whiskey Towers, you need to go check out their website. Really cool. It's a tower of whiskey that you put your bottles in. We got a picture of it right here on YouTube. And if you use promo code, in all caps, Whiskey Weather, that'll get you 10% off that purchase. Again, Whiskey Weather, all one word, all in caps. That gets you 10% off your order. You can go check out my Whiskey Weather Instagram page for what one of these actually looks like, and one of them in real action, because it's one of the coolest things I now own, and they're really sweet.
That's what you absolutely have to put your everyday players in. That's where you easily pull from. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome, and I'm happy to have them aboard. So again, whiskeytowers.com, use promo code, all caps, Whiskey Weather. This is episode 40, and if you're a new listener, we start our episodes with the numbered jersey of our episode and who was the best player to ever wear that jersey. So this week, it's episode 40, so Michael Burns, I think episode 40 and jersey number 40, there's going to be some hot debate, I think, with this one.
You think so? I'm looking at it. I think there's two players in this, but I think the one stands out.
Is he round?
Oh, he's absolutely round, and he hits dingers.
No. He doesn't hit dingers. He hit dinger. Solo dinger. Only one.
He hit dinger and eats zingers.
He ate several zingers and probably drank lots of beer. And if you haven't picked up on who we're talking about yet, that's Bartolo Colon. Him and Rick Honeycutt are the two who wore it for the longest tenured time. 19 years for both him and Bartolo. And Madison Bumgarner is one of the others that I think that I would include in there. I had Rick Honeycutt in there, but he's at 21.6 WAR in his career. Bartolo's at 46.2. A couple other names I want to throw in there. Rick Sutcliffe and Frank Tanana. Now, Frank has the most WAR, I believe, of any player who wore the number, but I don't think he wore it for as long as anybody else. He wore it for 8 seasons, but I think he had a no-hitter. I could be wrong on that. That may be Rick Wise who had the no-hitter. But Tanana, of players who wore it 9 years or more, he's got 57.1 with California. I'm guessing that's how you say his name, Tanana? Like banana, but Tanana. Maybe it's Tanana. I don't know. Played in the 70s. Way before our age.
Yeah, Bartolo definitely had worn the number for the longest and has the most WAR. But you could argue that guys like Bumgarner or Sutcliffe wore it for a long time. Wore it for less, and their WAR per year was higher.
And that's where I was going at with the WAR per year, because Rick Sutcliffe won a Cy Young in that jersey with the Cubs back in 1984, and he was number 4 in the MVP vote. He wasn't just like in the Cy Young candidate. When he came over, he won the NL Cy Young for the Cubs after pitching only for half the season or 2/3 of the season, because he got traded over from Cleveland that year. So he still won the Cy Young for best pitcher in the National League, and he pitched only, what was it, looks like 20 games in the NL that year, where there were multiple pitchers who pitched more, near 30, 35.
And still won Cy Young.
And still won Cy Young and was
want,
fourth in MVP in the NL. That's how good he was. He was 16-1 with the Cubs that year, with a 2.28 ERA in 150.1 innings. He had 7 complete games and 3 complete game shutouts. That's ridiculous. Rick Sutcliffe, our guy, 155 Ks in 150 innings. So he's got a Cy Young in it. I don't think did Bartolo ever win a Cy Young?
He won one Cy Young. One Cy Young. Otherwise, it's pretty scattered. He doesn't have many all-star appearances.
No. And that's why I was leaning away from him, just because it's the longevity game. It would be a funny story to use Bartolo. But, I mean, Rick Honeycutt, 19 years, so nearly 20 years. I more so know him as the pitching coach for the Dodgers for all those years.
Right.
The lefty pitcher, he had 109 wins, 143 losses, so I'm tossing him out of there. But Bartolo, Madison Bumgarner, though, I mean, he never won a Cy Young, but he's a four-time All-Star. He's finished in the top 10 in Cy Young 4 times. If you look at his playoff experience and performance, he's the NLS MVP, 3-time World Series champion, a World Series MVP. So that's where I play into him. His last couple of years haven't been great, and he's had a -0.7 WAR this year, which kind of takes away from his overall performance and numbers.
Since he left the Giants, he hasn't really been the same.
Yeah, he signed that big contract with the Diamondbacks, and I don't believe 2020 he pitched 41.2 innings. I guess he pitched a lot more in 2021 and 2022 than I thought. He just didn't pitch well. Right. I think he has an ERA with the Diamondbacks of a 5.17. With the Giants, it was a 3.32, and he had 119 wins to 92 losses. As far as Sutcliffe, with the Cubs, 82-65 with an ERA and a FIP of 3.6. So that's great. An ERA of 3.74. I'd say that's good. What's Bartolo's numbers?
Rick Honeycutt. You're thinking for Rick Sutcliffe. I clicked on Honeycutt and I'm like, Honeycutt has like no awards. I was looking for that Cy Young award. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think any of them really. I guess this is more of a conversation. I thought Bartolo had some more accolades to his name, but I think he was just an innings eater so much.
He was a longevity guy, right? It was more so that he pitched for 100 years and weighed 300 pounds and was not the athlete. He won a Cy Young in 2005 with the Angels. Like Tanana has 3 All-Stars, finished in the top 10 in Cy Young a few times. This may be the homer in me. To me, it's either Rick Sutcliffe or Madison Bumgarner.
Rick Sutcliffe has accolades to his name. Bumgarner never won that Cy Young. I feel like that propels Sutcliffe above Bumgarner one level.
Yeah, so I'm taking the Cy Young that Sutcliffe had and the World Series MVP of Bumgarner and kind of putting them together. Almost knocked that over. It's got the cap on. We're good. I think I'm going homer on this. I do think that longevity-wise, Bumgarner had more WAR and the better 15 years in it. But by WAR per year, I'm going to say that Bumgarner had less than what Sut had, and I'm going to pull the Cubs card on this one. And I think Rick Sutcliffe is going to be our episode 40. That's my thought. That's my vote.
No, I'm on the same page.
Okay.
It's hard to disagree with you, sir.
Well, this is the Rick Sutcliffe episode, and hopefully, Rick, you listen to this, and if so, cheers to you, sir. We owe you a hat, and we're going to hopefully run into you next week at Wrigley Field. So that has been episode 40 start, the best 40 in Major League Baseball history. I talked Michael into Rick Sutcliffe, but like I told you, I thought that there was going to be a little bit more of a debate than it originally looked.
I guess that he was both Bartolo Colon was just more of an innings eater than I remember.
Yeah, it's more of a longevity game. But hat tip to Bartolo, 46.2 WAR over 19 seasons. He pitched for the Montreal Expos for 1 season, the White Sox for a pair of seasons, the Angels, the Red Sox, the Yankees, The
Where do you
Oakland
remember
Athletics.
him? When you picture Bartolo, where do you remember what uniform?
The Mets, just because I think that's where he ended, and that's where he
And
spent a majority of his. I remember. So I grew up in the Chicago area when he was on the White Sox too. So I kind of remember him in a White Sox jersey, but I think his best years were in Anaheim with the Angels. I forgot
so,
he was on the Red Sox. But I think most of the pictures I see of him are in an Expos jersey, and he wore it for 1 year. But not to steal his sunshine away from Mr. Rick Sutcliffe, who is number 40, episode number 40. You can find us here on YouTube. We do this every week. We put out exclusive content at Barrels and Barrels Pod. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We put out exclusive content. We include that as well as our Thieves of the Week or Thieves of the Day, which are your best defensive gems and web gems of the last several days. You can find that here as well as our top 10 power rankings, which are brought to you by 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. I already mentioned this episode brought to you by Whiskey Towers. Just go to whiskeytowers.com using Whiskey Weather. That is whiskey with an E, weather, I meant to mention earlier. You can find us on Instagram. That's where the link, if you want to just go through my link tree through Whiskey Weather above me. But we also are on Instagram at Barrels and Barrels Pod, Facebook and TikTok at Barrels and Barrels Pod, and what used to be Twitter, now called X, at Barrels and Barrels. Find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Google, and Amazon Podcasts. Stitcher went away yesterday, so that no longer exists. So don't forget to hit the rating or review on our podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We ask you every week. We are up to 20 out of 20 5-star reviews on Apple, 14 out of 14 5 stars out of Spotify. That's 34 total 5-star reviews. So cheers to everybody who's reviewed us or rated us. We'd love to hear your review. Leave us a little message and what you think about these episodes. A big shout out to, I think his name's Doug Cree. He watches, I think it's Dr. Cree is how it shows up on Facebook and on YouTube. So a big shout out to him for listening every week and sending us some information and some feedback here and there. We've got shirts for sale. Are you wearing one of them, Micah?
No, I'm not.
No, he's wearing his Obvious shirts. I'm wearing an Obvious shirt as well. They're not a sponsor. No free ads.
No free. Hashtag
but
not
we've
an
got hashtag not an ad. We've got our own t-shirts for sale. You can find those in the link tree of our Instagram bio, or just head on over to charliemikeneverweekend.com. It's right there on their homepage. Just hit the shop button, and we're going to be the first t-shirt that pops up. Again, Charlie Mike Never Weekend. We've got hats. That's what Michael's wearing, and also the glassware that I'm drinking out of tonight. And I'm sure Michael's got one of those glasses ready to go as well.
Of course.
He's got the Wisdom glass. We've got 2 Oths. You've only got 3 Wisdom glasses left, so head on over if you want one of those real quick. 2 Oths, we've got a little more, and then we've got a few more Glens, and we'll be filling up these Glens. So head on over and check that out. And filling up these Glens, in this week's episode, we are going with Peerless Small Batch Bourbon Whiskey. This is a barrel proof. They put these out at barrel proof, at barrel strength at least. This one comes in at 111.3 proof. Every small batch is a little different. So these are all going to be a little different than when you buy them on the shelf. So one batch is not going to be like the same. This is strictly sweet mash, not a sour mash. And we can dive into that in a different episode because there's a lot more to the sweet and sour mash designations, and we're not going to waste your time with that, but we can work on that in the off season. But this comes in at, as I mentioned, 111 proof. They don't put a mash bill on this. It's a little bit of a secret. There's some estimations on what it is. I think I saw 68% corn to 75% corn. There's not a whole lot of info about the bottle. It's $70 to $75 MSRP. No age statement on the bottle. From the research I could find, some places say it's a 4-year bourbon. Some say no age statement. I'm going with the no age statement because I'm not going to be putting out information that I don't have 100% honest truth and confirmation behind.
It used to be when they first released their rye in 18 that it was only 24 months, and now I believe Peerless, from what I've looked at, Peerless is aged at least 4 years.
Okay, well, I got this in 2020, so I don't know where we're at this point. I'm just gonna say It says straight. It says Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So by that law, I believe it has to be 1 year old. I'm assuming it's 2 years old because it's straight bourbon whiskey. But in order for it to say Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, it has to be aged in Kentucky for at least 12 months. Word. So we know it's at least 1 year old. It comes in at 111 proof. Peerless out of Louisville. Have yet to make it there. I've had a lot of bottles shipped here. Shout out Daniel. I have some samples on the way, I think, because I've been a mule. But
it's a different week for you, Brandon, when you don't have a package. I'm jelly. I'm very jelly.
Still waiting on one from you, pal.
I'll bring you my package next week.
Well, that's a cutaway. Michael's gonna bring me his package in person.
So what do you get off this Peerless, Brandon?
Caramel. No, I'm just throwing that out there. Off the bat, orange. Citrus to me.
Ooh, yeah, that is citrusy.
A little citrus. There's a little bit of caramel. More confectioner sugar. I think like a baking, not the sugar, like granulated sugar, but confectioner sugar. Powdered sugar.
I do get that citrus right away, and then I do get, for how young it is darker, and I do get an oak on the nose. So like a medium oak on the nose. It's definitely a bold nose.
Definitely. It's not weak by any means. I think there's some. I find that when I listen to us, I use the word complexity a lot. So I'm going to try to get away from that one. So I'm not going to say it's complex, but
it's beautiful.
Do I say that a lot too?
No.
One of my old news directors thought I did. That's a inside joke between Michael and I. Yeah,
here's a really weird nose. Yes, I get a little spiciness on the nose, like jalapeno. Never smelled it before, but
I've gotten green peppers on a nose before.
Have you?
It was weird because I hate green peppers, so that was like an instant turnoff. I don't remember what it was, but I only got it. Part of me makes me think it was the 101 toasted short barrel, but that's not what this episode is. This is episode 40 with Peerless Small Batch. On the tongue, I got, again, I like to say sweet tart. There's a little sweet tartness to it. I saw you just took a poll. What are your thoughts right off the bat?
It's spicy at first on the tongue. Like, what is this, 111 you said?
Mm-hmm.
I would guess higher based off of my first sip here. I get the pepper's on my mind now. I feel like I can taste that pepper, but it's bold oak. I'm surprised how oaky it is for the age.
Yeah, there's definitely some oak in it. I have the spice and the heat more on the back end of the pour. The more I sat and enjoyed it, I'd say it's very voluminous. I felt like it engulfs my mouth. Like some of these pours, you don't really feel it in your cheeks or in your lips. You know what I'm saying? You just kind of feel it on the tongue, and then the tingle and the burn kind of goes away. This one just continued to build all over. The mouthfeel was very good. I wouldn't call it buttery. I'd call it more tingly.
How's the complexity?
It's got a wide variety of flavors, which make me feel very happy.
It does flourish throughout the mouth. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. It lingers, and I think that's what we usually use that. I'm coming right back to it. We usually use the word complex when we have multi layers to this thing, rather than it sitting on the tongue, going down the throat, and being done.
Mm-hmm. I got a lot of oak out of this, so maybe it is 4 years on this one. There's a lot. If it was 24 months, I mean, they did a pretty damn good job of getting the oak in 24 months. But I got oak. I've got some cherry. There's still a lot of citrus. I think the citrus. This one matches more so the nose to me than some others. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of smells how it tastes, and it's not always the same like that. So that transfers.
What's the finish taste for you? Now that you talked without taking a sip there, or did you just get another pull?
We just got another pull.
It gets grainy towards the end for me when it's sat for a while.
It's a little rye, for sure. Whether that's the rye grain, I'm assuming it's malted barley as the third ingredient. We don't know the mash bill, but that would be my guess. That's the typical mash. If anybody's been to Peerless and they've told you the mash bill, we'd love to hear that. Hit that in the comments below on YouTube or wherever you're at. The finish itself, I think it's a longer lasting finish than a lot of whiskeys that we've had as at least as of late. I feel like a lot of the ones that we've sampled or tried within the last couple of weeks, the finish wasn't as necessarily as long lasting. It would kind of taper and then it was gone. This one, it's been about a minute and a half, and I still feel a good flavor, a good heat. I would say I would think about 111, 115 is about the proof I would put this at. Now that you've had a couple of sips rather than that first one, and that first one burns all the stuff out of your mouth, what do you get this at? Like, you
proof-wise,
think it's higher still?
I would still put like 10 more proof on this thing, like 118 kind of deal. I still think it's on the higher. It hits on the higher end. It's definitely bold. It's definitely a bold flavors.
I'd say this kind of reminds me of an Elijah Craig barrel proof.
Yeah.
I have a couple of them up there, ranging from 2020 to 2022. I need to get on the 20. Did you see just what just popped out? C923. It's like 133, 14 years old. So grab it if you can find it, and we'll get to that here in a second. But I enjoy this. We're on our rating scale. Would you rate this?
So this is my first Peerless. I've held out of buying. I've passed up on one before, and actually that's the only time I've ever seen it. Maybe twice.
Yeah.
I would give this guy an everyday player.
I think that's where I'm leaning too. Why do you go everyday player rather than bench or rather than all-star?
So it's not 90 proof or below.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not. I think the oakiness is it's a medium oak. It's not a young oak.
Mm-mm.
Like if it was 24 months, this would be, like you said, they did some magic here.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the oakiness. The sweetness is not overly sweet.
Right.
And then the finish, it lingers. It gets a little grainy, but nothing to push me away from it.
Yeah, I think that finish at the back end, like you mentioned, it's got a little bit of that grain, and that's what turns me off from going all-star. But for everyday player, I think I would go to. I mean, I've been burning through this since I opened it, and I opened this late last year and sent you the mess. I think I sent you this sample a hot minute ago. We just haven't gotten around to it. But similar words to complex would be tangled, convoluted, intricate. I'm going to use the word intricate. It is intricate.
I like that one. I like intricate.
Yes. Thorny, tricky, knotty, hard, difficult, involute, involuted, fiddly. And
I like the idea of knotty, like because you have knots in wood, and that could be you could have some knots in the barrels. This one's a little knotty.
Tortuous, impenetrable. Well, this is not impenetrable because we're drinking and we enjoy. But we went ahead. We went ahead and went with everyday player on this on our Barrels and Barrels of Bourbon and Baseball podcast rating scale. And if you are new to this, our rating scale is baseball related. We go from Hall of Fame, which is the best ever, right? Top of the class. 1% of all baseball players make the Hall of Fame.
We haven't had any yet.
Yeah,
right.
We haven't had a bourbon yet. But All-Stars
so
next on the list. You've got 2 All-Star teams every year, right? Their teams have All-Stars that are perennial All-Stars. Sometimes there's just like the Brian LaHair All-Star where it just out of nowhere came through and became an All-Star. Or sometimes it's one of those that you know it's going to be an All-Star. You
Brian
love
LaHair,
it.
Man. He never really got a chance. He was always going to be replaced. He never got a real chance. Dude was 14 home runs in April, and then you hit 14 home runs in April? We're going to bring up Anthony Rizzo instead. See ya.
So on our Barrels and Barrels of Bourbon Baseball podcast rating scale, what is everyday player, Michael?
Everyday player is that guy that you enjoy going to every now and then. He's not he compared to an all-star, he's not something that you're hiding and think that this is one of the next greatest things. It's something that you maybe would share with a friend. Your all-star, you're only sharing with your bourbon enthusiast tie-in that you want to be like, bro, check this out. The everyday player is something you enjoy that you would go to maybe twice a week.
Yeah, and it's something that you can always rely on in your lineup, and it's always you want it always in your lineup. It's like a Nico Horner or an Ian Happ, where every day you know it's going to be consistent. It's going to come through. Let's say Brandon Marsh as a Philly, or Cal Raleigh as a Seattle Mariner,
The
right?
big dumper.
The big dumper. That's somebody you always want in your lineup day in and day out. And then next is the bench. The bench, you may think it's a knock. You're not an everyday player, but it doesn't mean you're a bad player. You come in the pinch. You sometimes are a defensive replacement. Heck, you might be a spot starter. It's something that mixes up the rotation, right? You don't go to it every week. You don't go to it maybe every month, but it's always got a chance to really wow you at a later date.
Right. You've got at least one great tool, and it could be the creaminess, it could be the spiciness, it could be the flavor, it could be a dessert bourbon.
So that's bench. And then finally, Mr. DFA himself, Michael Burns, can explain what DFA stands for.
So DFA is the type
Josh Donaldson.
that you take into your office, you sit him down, and you say, I don't want you on my shelf anymore. See you later. This is something that you don't enjoy. You would not recommend to a friend. You would rather save your money and spend it on something else.
Yeah, and you either pour it down the drain, you mix it with drinks, maybe you make food with it. I know some people who make cookies with the bourbon that they didn't like because at least you get the bourbon flavor in the cookies. But that is our Barrels and Barrels of Bourbon and Baseball podcast rating scale. Peerless Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. This is the small batch. I hear their single barrels are immaculate. Haven't made it to that point yet.
Their double oak, I've heard, is really good.
That one, I think, top 5 whiskey of the year a couple of years ago from Whiskey Advocate, because we really enjoy everything that Whiskey Advocate says is the best. But
absolutely.
Back then, I think it was like 5th or 6th, but I've heard great things about it. I've tried the absinthe one. Not a huge fan, but I'm not a huge fan of the absinthe flavor. But go give them a try. We enjoyed this Kentucky Peerless Kentucky.
I was definitely
Straight
surprised.
Bourbon
I think that Elijah Craig Barrel Proof comp was fantastic.
and they're about the same price, but this is a little bit more widely available, I'd say, in most areas, because the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof only comes out 3 times a year and it's allocated. And speaking of allocated, we're at allocated season. Michael is already signed up. I know I have as well. I think we're past the date, so sorry. But the Old Forester birthday bourbon is going to be picked here, I think, by the time this episode drops. It's either tomorrow or I think it's Friday, right? Yeah, so I guess a day from when this episode drops. And then also Four Roses limited edition, they put that out. But we're starting to get to September. September is Bourbon Heritage Month, and that's kind of the month you start to see. Yeah, that's kind of the month that you start to see a lot of different whiskeys drop. The allocation season. So be on the lookout for some of those new ones. We're talking the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof that comes out every September. That is going to be batch C923. I just mentioned it. It's got like 133 proof, 14 years. I believe that'll be the oldest age statement on an Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. So that's going to be a widely sought after bottle. Other
I
stuff
usually
that
have luck
comes
getting that in Alabama.
Yeah, you might have better luck than I might. Honestly, I think I've seen one Elijah Craig up here since I moved here.
Okay. So if I see one, I'll bring my wife with me to grab 2.
Yes, and definitely do that. But yeah, it's allocation season. This is kind of when people start to go a little crazy with their money. Just be smart on your spending. That's what I would say. Is a lot of people chase after some of these bottles, and a lot of the times you're either just paying for the label or you're just paying because of it's available around it, right? And because it's available and. It's, I've got a shot at this. I mean, if you run into a Michter's 10-year, sure. But if you're running into something that you haven't done a whole lot of research on, and that's another thing, is if you see something you don't know much about it and it's an expensive bottle, maybe do some research on it before you pull the trigger, because you don't want to be into that spot where you're like, eh.
Also,
right?
Don't be the guy that you get picked for the allocation season and you grab that bottle and you take the picture to post it on secondary while still in the store or while it's in your cart.
Yes.
Don't be that guy. At least go home. You can wait. You can wait a little bit.
Or do it in your car, at least, right?
Yes, just not in the store. That just
That's
looks
the
like
craziest. That's the craziest thing is where it's allocation day in Alabama, and then you see a picture pop up, and it's literally the bottle in the cart because the dude hasn't even checked out yet, and he's already selling it. But that's a podcast for a different day. This is episode 40 of Barrels and Barrels, a Bourbon and Baseball podcast. We just finished our bourbon segment. We're heading on to trivia, which is how we kind of divide our baseball talk and our trivia talk. So this week's trivia question, Michael Burns. Ronald Acuña Jr. and Corbin Carroll both have reached 20 home runs and 40 stolen bases this year. Before they did it this year, who was the last player to do it, and in what year did he do it?
Did we have this question already, kind of?
I don't believe so.
Because then it would be 40-40 as well, qualifies.
Because 20 home runs and 40 stolen bases.
Oh, 20 home runs and 40 stolen bases.
Yes, because they have neither of them hit 40 home runs. I think Corbin Carroll just hit number 26, and Acuña's sitting at 29 coming into tonight.
Oh, 20 home runs and 40 stolen bases.
When was the last time it was done, and who did it?
The name that popped into my mind was Rafael Furcal.
Okay.
Like, dude swatted and had some speed for the Atlanta Braves in the late 90s, early 2000s. So Rafael Furcal, let's go 2000 and who?
So I'm looking up Baseball Reference to see. He is not the answer. He never hit 20 home runs. The most he ever hit in his career was 15 in both 2003 and 2006. He did steal 40 bases 2 times, but not even in those years that he hit 15. It is Jonathan VR, and he did it with the Baltimore Orioles in 2019.
Oh.
That's a name that I wouldn't
That
have been
was
able
his
to...
resurgence year then.
Yep. And then he went to the Brewers, I think, and then the Cubs. Was he on the Cubs last year, or was it 2021?
Last year.
It was last year. So Ronald Acuña was part of that trivia question, and we'll get more onto his season here in just a second. But, Michael, have you ever gone to a baseball game or any sporting event and seen multiple teams play and ever wondered, like, okay, it always seems like so-and-so hits a home run when I'm at a game?
It always seems like when I see Braves versus Cubs, the Braves always beat the Cubs.
Right. In person?
Yes.
Or just watching it on TV? Okay, so there's going to be a new app for that. It's called Momento. It's called Momento Live Sports Scrapbook, and this is available on iOS and Android, so go check that out and download it. This is really cool. You've got the chance to be a beta tester of this app through Barrels and Barrels Pod. Use the code Bourbon Baseball when you download the app, and what you can do is you can go in and search any game you've been to, and it will add up the statistics, and it'll tell you what teams you've seen, how many times you've seen them, what their record is, and down the road, their goal is within the next 1 to 2 months that you'll have summerly level stats that'll tell you the record of when you're in the attendance, how many times you've seen any given player play, hit a home run, hit a three-pointer, whatever the sport is. So far, they've got games starting in 1993 for Major League Baseball. There's NBA, NFL, NHL, college football. They're going to get into WNBA and women's and men's college basketball as well. They're still in the beta testing point of this, but you as a barrelhead get an early access to this by using promo code Bourbon Baseball as you open this app. Again, this is the Momento Sports app, so go check that out. Momento Live Sports Scrapbook. I've already downloaded it here on my phone. Let me open it. And you can input the games that you've been to. You get mementos. You can put a picture of the game that you've been to. It tells you how many times. So this year, I've seen the Cubs play 8 times, the Reds 7 times, the Dodgers 4 times. And down the road, it'll tell you what the records are of those teams, so say you've seen Cody Bellinger hit 6 home runs. It'll tell you the statistics that Cody Bellinger has when you see him in person. And it's a really cool app. There used to be an app called Sports Passport like this, and they had to fold because they weren't getting support. But Momento is kind of taking the game, and they're going to up it. So go check them out. Again, Momento Sports app. Michael, download that on your phone. Use promo code, all lowercase, Bourbon Baseball, and you'll get access to this website. A really cool opportunity. And as a sports fan myself, and it also helps you keep track of what stadiums you've been to and also what games you've seen. Oh, yeah, I went to this game who pitched, right? Oh, Sean Marshall threw 6 innings of two-run baseball and had 12 strikeouts.
No, that's really cool.
Yeah, a really cool app. I really enjoy it. I geek out on it because it tells me, okay, I know I'm 5-3 when the Cubs play this year at a game that I've been to.
You know, there's a reason. I knew there was a reason that I always kept my game ticket stubs and just stuck them in my room.
Right. Take your ticket stubs, put them into this app, and you'll know what the team's records are when you've seen them play. It's really cool.
There's a problem, though. You're not going to want me in a Cubs game, I feel like, when we pull up my statistics of when I've been to a Cubs game, and the Cubs are like winning percentage of like 250.
Okay, well, then you may have to not buy some flights for next week. We'll talk about that after the show. But speaking of baseball, the real hot story, we've talked about it for back-to-back weeks. We're going to make it 3 in a row. The American League West, this is the best divisional race right now. 3 teams coming into play today were tied for first place. Now, the Mariners and the Astros have both won. The Astros are 77-58. The Mariners are 76-57. They're both tied with the same games back at 0, but the Astros have more wins, but I think the Mariners have technically the better winning percentage.
By 1
but they're
point.
both tied by 1 point, yeah. And then the Texas Rangers, as we're talking right now, are in the top of the 10th versus the Mets on the road. So they could win, they could lose. We'll know here shortly, but if they win, it'll be, again, a 3-way tie atop that division. Very fun division. It looked like a couple months ago it was the Rangers division, right? And then they've come back to earth. The Mariners look like one of the best teams in baseball. And the Astros are kind of silently just skating through, right? Like, we haven't talked much about the Astros.
It actually was almost a three-team or 4-team distant, and it wasn't Seattle. Seattle was that 4th team. It was
a month
Texas, Houston Angels.
Yeah.
And Seattle
Insane.
went on an absolute tear while Texas did the complete opposite.
And part of that turnaround, I think, is Julio Rodriguez, right? The play he's had over the last couple of weeks, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, but since the start of the second half, so since the All-Star break, the All-Star game was in Seattle. He had a great showing at the Home Run Derby, right? Usually that kind of tuckers people's out. He had a rough first half, but boy, look at his numbers for the second half. He's batting .365, .422, slugging .635. So that's a quick math. OPS .1057, a WRC plus of 192. That means he's 92% better than the average player in baseball right
192?
now. 192? 192. Average is 100. Anything above that, every other number. So a 101 would mean you're 1% better than the average baseball player, 102, etc.
You know, I didn't know
192.
I didn't know that 100 was league average. I thought it was like a little above that, and I didn't know that that's how it was determined.
OPS plus and WRC plus, I believe, are the same way. 100 is the benchmark. Anything above 100, you're an above average player. Anything below, you're a below average player. He's got a WRC plus of 192. His ISO is 271, so he's hitting for power. He's got 11 bombs, 13 doubles, 38 RBIs, 13 stolen bases, 62 hits, and 187 plate appearances. His on-base percentage is .422. He went on, he's on a current hit streak. It looks like it's up to 14, and that was coming into today, I believe. Yes. He had 4 hits yesterday against Oakland, or 2 days ago.
And you're talking
Oakland.
Since July 1st. In August,
July
14th. August, he's been absolutely incredible. His average since in just August is .429.
It's ridiculous. So that's the MVP candidate if he had a better first half. The other MVP candidate in that division, the Angels, Shohei Ohtani, and we'll get to him here in a second. But out of this division, we talked last week about predictions. The Texas Rangers kind of crapped the bed last weekend versus the Brewers, and they haven't played that great against the Mets. I think they're splitting the series so far, but they do have the bases loaded here, and it looks like they're about to take the lead. So they're going to go 2-1 most likely versus the Mets. The Astros have beaten the Red Sox 2 out of 3 at Fenway this week, and then the Mariners took 2 out of 3 versus Oakland this week. 76-57. Do you still stand by your prediction last week, or do you want to change that?
What was my prediction last week? That the Rangers still win it?
I think you said the Astros.
Oh, did I say the... It's tough to bet against the Astros, especially now that they got Justin Verlander. Framber threw a great game, a decent game again today. quality. Did he get a quality start out of it?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the
He got
the
quality
box score
start.
yet.
6 innings,
He did?
2 runs, 5 hits, 5 Ks. That's what you can ask for out of Framber. He could have went deeper, only 83 pitches. I still feel like Houston, they just know how to. They've been there, done that. It's not so much of a chase for them. I think Seattle finishes second though, with the Texas Rangers losing it.
The Mariners are a hot team. I'm wearing a hat for the Mariners. I'd say that they're probably my favorite AL team right now. I'm a Cubs fan by heart, but I've also got money on the Mariners at 50-1 to win the World Series this year. So
It's easy when
I'm
you're
also,
a Cubs fan to pick an American League team.
Oh, for sure. And they're a fun team, too. Watching their games, I've watched more Mariners baseball in the last month and a half than I have any other. Them and the Baltimore Orioles. And that series they played, Baltimore, a couple of weekends ago, was fantastic. Wow. Inning ending. The Rangers do not score. So they strand the bases loaded. What a play.
They didn't score their free run or free runner.
They had the bases loaded with no outs. And they didn't score a run, I don't think. Wow, insane. Yeah, so Texas and Seattle, we mentioned it last week. They play 7 times in the last 10 games. I think that's where that division kind of headlock comes into play because the Houston Astros, they're not going to be facing those two teams. They're going to be able to make ground any game that they're playing because one of those teams is going to have a loser. So they're going to gain one game back and forth.
They're going to beat up on each other.
Right. So hopefully it's still this close towards the end because it's going to make for a fun race in the AL West. I think all 3 teams will make the playoffs, personally. I think, though, the Baltimore Orioles are going to win the East. And right now, Tampa Bay is looking good.
Okay, I was waiting to see your thoughts on Tampa Bay were there for that.
We've been saying for weeks that they're going to continue to falter, but they just won back-to-back games, I think, against the Marlins.
4 in a row.
Yeah. They are 82 and 52. They're 30 games above 500. And the team that would be chasing them is the Toronto Blue Jays, who it looks like they're 9 games back of the Tampa Bay Rays right now.
They fell off.
Yeah, so if I have a hard time finding that the Rays are going to fall 9 games to the Jays. But I don't see any team in the AL West, maybe other than the Rangers, to just kind of spiral. I think the Blue Jays really are hoping for one of those AL West teams to fall rather than the Rays at this point. But I still think all 3 teams in the AL West, and all 3 teams could potentially win the World Series.
You know, what could happen is Seattle and Texas beat up on each other so much that Toronto does sneak in. Or if one team destroys, sweeps one of the series.
Right. Yeah, I haven't looked at the Blue Jays' final schedule, but I wonder what that would look like.
Now, the Astros do play the Mariners in Seattle, the second last series.
Okay, so they will. Man, that's going to be so. That's going to be so good of a
Blue
final
Jays
week of baseball.
Play the Rays 2 of their last 3 series. Actually, their last 4 series is Yankees, Rays, Yankees, Rays.
Oh, that's gonna and they play the Texas Rangers for 4 games next week. Oh no, in 2 weeks,
2 weeks,
middle of September. But they also have the A's and the Royals. So and the
don't
Rockies,
you just love wild card baseball now, or this playoff contention right here?
With 6 teams, right? We wouldn't be talking about this. We would be saying, "Oh well, the Jays are out of it at this point," but they're not. But that AL West is incredible. A team that you picked them to win the playoffs. And they made probably the most bold moves at the deadline. The Angels, they just decided they kind of hit I think they did this.
Waved the white flag. Oh man,
5 guys, right? 5 guys they put on waivers.
Lucas Giolito, Matt Moore, Renato Lopez, Hunter Renfroe, and Randall Grichuk.
And they traded for 3 of those guys at the end of July.
They traded for... Did they have Matt Moore already, or they trade for him?
I thought so. I think he signed in the offseason with them.
How mad are you? I mean, I saw on Trash Panda's fan page that Trash Panda's fans were pissed that they traded away prospects for nothing. For 1 month.
Right.
Of players.
Right. Man, I got some more out of that. I got some jalapeno out of that.
You
randomly.
did get jalapeno?
So there you go.
Let's go.
Yeah. Very weird. It's not like it doesn't turn me off either. Like I'm not like, oh, I wouldn't. It's different, but yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, I mean, I would be pissed too. Like you wasted 2 of your top 3 prospects for Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez, who you just threw on freaking waivers. I do think that those are some good names to potentially look at if you're a team in contention. I wonder if the Reds will, who would be a great guy for the Reds to go out and grab?
Giolito.
Harrison Bader.
Oh, Harrison Bader?
And Giolito.
Yeah.
Giolito and Harrison Bader. Those would be 2 good guys, I think, that you know why the Angels are doing this, though, right?
Money,
because they can potentially get underneath the tax, the luxury tax, by cutting these salaries.
If the guys are claimed,
if the guys are claimed,
released, they still pay for it.
But I think the way they did it is they did it to where if one of these guys is going to be picked up by a team. So here's the thing. It's August 31st, the day that this episode drops. Any player who you want to play in the playoffs has to be on the roster or in the organization by September 1st.
Right.
On the day of September 1st, if you are in the organization, you qualify to be in the team on the playoffs. Some team just signed somebody today that made them playoff eligible. Tucker Barnhart just signed with the Dodgers.
Oh, did he?
From the Cubs. Yeah. He's in the minors, but he's in the organization as of today.
Right.
So if they need him in the playoffs, he can be added to the playoff roster. But you can't add anybody to your playoff roster unless they've been in the organization since September 1st. So I think the Angels strategically did this because if a team really wants Randall Grichuk or a team really wants Lucas Giolito, they have to pick him up.
They want him.
Right. They have to add him by the end of the day today. And that would mean that the Angels still get the salary relief.
Right.
I would think the best names in my mind, I would go after Giolito if I was the Cubs.
He was good with the White Sox. I wouldn't say good. He was, I think, a 3.45 ERA over the year. I mean, the guy.
Yeah, I'd take a 4th or 5th starter if you can. I think the Reds are going to try and claim the Mets just won. So the Texas Rangers are 1 game back. They lost 2 out of 3 to the New York Mets, I believe, as the Mariners and the Astros go on to win. Aroldis Chapman is the one who's going to get the loss. He's been pretty brutal here the last couple of days, I believe. So the Angels put a bunch of players on waivers. The Yankees got rid of Donaldson. He's DFA'd. He got cut.
He got released.
Also, Harrison, he got released. Yeah, see ya. Here's your money. Get out of here. Harrison Bader put on waivers. That's an interesting name.
And do you know how the story with Bader of how he found out he was put on waivers?
Uh-oh.
He said he was sitting in the Yankees cafeteria in the lunchroom watching ESPN. He says he never watches ESPN. And he says all of a sudden his name popped up on the bottom line, Harrison Bader placed on waivers. 10 minutes, he said. 10 minutes before the next activity for baseball started for the next game. And he was pretty okay. Usually a player who sees their name and finds out that way rather than in person from their officials gets pissed off. And he took it more as like, you know what? I'm blessed to be playing this game. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just happy that I am being able to play Major League Baseball. Yeah,
and he's going to go to a playoff team most likely, or a team that's in playoff contention. I mean, I think he'd be a great fit in Cincinnati, as I've already mentioned, but other teams that could probably use him, I mean, the Diamondbacks, do they need any outfielders? Probably not. They just got Tommy Pham. But, so get this, the Mets just won on a walk-off hit by pitch. That's how they won the game.
So,
yeah.
Bases loaded?
Bases loaded.
How did Chapman load the bases?
I have no idea, man. I was paying attention to our podcast, Michael Burns.
You have the baseball game up. My TV's off. You don't see the reflection in the background here, like you sometimes do.
So, I mean, Bader would be a great name. I think Randall Grichuk has played very well with the Angels since he's gone over there. He would be a good veteran presence on a team that's looking for veteran leadership. The Brewers could probably use him. I know the Brewers are doing pretty well as of right now, but they've got a lot of young guys outside of Yelich in their outfield with Weimer, Frelick,
Frelick's been good lately.
Frelick's been really good. But there's a couple teams that are interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cubs tried to sneak out a Matt Moore or a Lucas Giolito. They're not in a spot, though, where they're probably likely to land them because it goes from the worst team in the league to the best team in the league when it comes to waivers. So Oakland has the claim on anybody first, then the Royals, then the Rockies, the White Sox, etc. I think the Cubs are the 20th right now. They have like the 11th best record in baseball.
Now, this is different from years past. There used to be a waiver period where you could make trades now. That's gone.
It used to be that's gone. So what you're doing is you're basically just buying his salary. It used to be a waiver trade. You would claim him, and then the two teams would discuss whether or not you want it. Like, anybody could be put on waivers back in the day. Bryce Harper got put on waivers and was claimed. But once you're claimed, you either get withdrawn or the team would have to trade with you. And that's how you would see trades. I think that's how the Cubs got Daniel Murphy back in 2019, was a waiver deal. Now that's gone. So if you put a player on waivers and they're claimed, you get them. Or the team pulls them back.
Right.
I don't even know if they can pull them back anymore. I haven't read too much into that.
So that's the difference, is in years past, let's say you're the Giants and you don't want the Cubs or Reds to get a player. You could just claim the guy and then just not work out a deal and he stays there. I think now, this year, if you claim the guy, you got him.
You got him. Right.
So you're paying that salary. So there's that risk now of where I've read that people think the Giants and Reds are going to be too cheap to claim anybody.
See, the thing is, I don't think the Reds have to be too cheap. They're not near the salary cap. And if they've got a shot, I mean, they did win today against the Giants, so they did gain a game on the Giants. They didn't gain a game on the Cubs. They're still 2 back of the Cubs in the Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks are playing the Dodgers tonight, I believe, in Game 3. Yeah, they're about to start that game. But it's going to be an interesting 24 hours, and there could be a couple players claimed by the time this podcast drops. So I don't really want to go into predictions because we may look like we've got egg on our face at this point. But
now, do you think this is... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go for it.
I was going to say, do you think this is good for baseball, not having this trade period where players are just being released to save money at the end of the month of August?
I do, because I don't think they're going to be straight up released because they're not going to be able to sign with another team past September 1st if they're playoff contenders. So I think it's good because you don't have the Giants playing games, right? Like the scenario you just painted. You don't have teams playing games with the waiver system.
I don't like
this is the first time I think it's come into play.
Yeah, I don't like that players are just being placed on waivers, like teams that are out of it suddenly, and I feel like it's a bad look.
You think it's kind of like a fantasy football team dropping players because they're done and giving them to other teams?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's simply a salary dump by some teams. I'm going to save $1 million. We're done.
Yeah. I think there's some strategy still to it. Like, will the Toronto Blue Jays pick somebody up because they think that can make them incrementally better than potentially the Astros, etc. So, looking at that team in LA, man, I mean, they're going to need a lot of work. And a lot of that is going to be dependent on Shohei Ohtani, right? The big news last week, the moment we ended our podcast last week, it came out that Shohei had left the game with an arm injury, right? And then we heard the next day he's got a torn UCL, which is the Tommy John surgery. Now, he's already had one Tommy John surgery in his career. This would be his second. There's thoughts that he may go through a different... I don't believe he had Tommy John right away last time. I think he did the PRP injections for a little bit and then ultimately had the Tommy John.
And this, I think, is only a partial tear.
Right.
And Dice came...
Masahiro Tanaka.
Yeah, Tanaka.
Right?
Tanaka, yep.
Had the same thing.
What happened to that guy?
Yeah, I don't know. He disappeared. Witness protection program. I have no idea. I heard about him on the radio today. I was like, oh, that's right. He pitched at one point, and he just kind of disappeared. But with Shohei Ohtani, what do you think this does to his contract status, number one? Because he's the best free agent this offseason, but you were getting a pitcher and a hitter. Now next year he can't pitch.
I think he lost $100 million.
That's all?
At least $100 million off his deal.
So what would you say his deal's going to be then?
It's going to be a more midterm deal with an opt-out after year 1 and 2.
See, if I'm a team,
not 1 year.
If I'm a team, are you giving him an opt-out, though? I just spent all this money to try to bring you in, and you're going to opt out?
It happened with Carlos Correa both times. Correa, Machado.
Yeah, but Machado kind of waived his no trade and stayed with the team that he's with.
I think that's if you really want the guy, you give him whatever he wants to come. Hey, you know what? You want that opt out?
Right.
We're not going to maybe give you after year 1, but Ohtani wants to build. I think Ohtani wants to. I wonder if Ohtani will take a shorter term deal to recoup that value in 2 years.
Right. So I've heard some people throw out 2 years, $100 million, and make him a closer to recoup that value, right? Because then he's not pitching every 5 days. He's not pitching as many innings. It's maybe not as much of a tax.
He might play outfield.
But here's the question, though. There's some rules behind this that would. A lot of people are saying just make him a closer. Here's the thing. The Ohtani rule, which was made that a pitcher could be a DH the moment he came out of the game, but not if he comes in as a reliever. So if he was the DH the whole game and came in as a reliever, the moment he gets taken out of the game, you lose your DH. So whoever would replace him on the mound, say you go to extras, you lose Ohtani's bat.
That'd be fun.
Another thing is, say you're having him as the closer. What if he's batting in the bottom of the 8th and he gets on base? How the hell is he going to warm up? You don't get a pinch runner. It's not like men's league where you can take him out.
You're going to see this guy sprint from the dugout all the way out, even if he doesn't bat and say he, hit in the 7th, and you're going to see this guy run across the field to go to the bullpen.
Or do you have him warm up in the cages down below, right, where people take swings? They've got cages in every ballpark now, but so there's some logistical there. I don't see him becoming a closer unless he stays strictly as a pitcher and a pinch hitter, really, honestly. That would be what I would think. Or I still see some team paying he's Aaron Judge right now, right, without being a pitcher. He could still be Aaron Judge. So you could still give him $400 million for 10 years. Do you think he takes that deal? You'd have to, like you said, you'd have to put an opt-out. But as a team, are you paying an opt-out? Like, I'm going to invest $400 million in 10 years, but I'm going to give you an opt-out after 2 that you can just up and leave and ruin all my plans?
Yeah, I still think you hope that, and then you can always give him an extension. If he wants to come to you, right? If he's coming to you, he obviously somewhat likes it, like Seattle.
So I ask you, Michael Burns, as a Cub fan, do you still want Shohei Ohtani or no? Shohei is a free agent this offseason. As a Cubs fan, are you signing him right now? 10 years, $400 million.
What you're really asking me here, Brandon, is do I want Shohei Ohtani or Cody Bellinger? That's the question you're asking.
I'm asking you, do you want Shohei Ohtani?
I know, but that's the real question is, do you want to spend money on Ohtani or Cody Bellinger?
Mm-hmm. Kind of, but answer my question.
Because if you sign Ohtani, you're probably not getting Belly.
I'm scared now because you don't know if you're getting pitcher Ohtani. You're getting hitter Ohtani. He's going to be the same guy for the next 6-7 years.
When Ohtani
most likely
first came and they were like, oh, Ohtani, and he really didn't perform the first 2 years, I think people wrote him off pretty quickly, at least in our fantasy league. He went for $1 in 2020.
In 2021, he was 50 to 1 to win the MVP because I was pissed. I was going to put money on him just to win the MVP, and I didn't, and he ended up winning it because he was coming off of that surgery. He's 29 years old. He's still young.
Is he 29? I thought he was younger.
He's 29. He'll be 30 in July of next year, July 5th of next year. So
the dude rakes.
And I mean, he's been great ever since he's come back. He's got like a 400 on base, 400 batting average since he got hurt.
Wow.
Yeah. So, again, are you signing Shohei Ohtani for 10 years, $400 million?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
You are?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the reasoning behind it?
40 million a year is going to be nothing by the time that contract finishes. It sounds like a lot. It's the most a hitter will get, right? Mike Trout is 36.
Judge is getting 40 a year, 9 years, 360. So that's the Judge deal with just one extra year. But I think he's got a year or two younger on what Judge was when Judge was a free agent.
Right. No, I'm taking Ohtani. The dude rakes. The dude brings that money in. And if you want to talk non-baseball, like we've talked about before, but baseball-wise, can you be mad at a 40 home run hitter? I don't know. That starts to scare me. I thought he was 27 for some reason.
But again, that's the thing. Are you paying $40 million for a DH? He doesn't bring any other value to the field. He's not playing first base. He's not playing the outfield. He can't throw for a year, maybe a year and a half, because it's his second UCL injury. So if he does have Tommy John, that's more of an 18-month rather than a 12-month injury. So you're talking 2026 potentially for the first time he pitches.
Oh man,
he's 31 at that point.
And I'm just like, just because he's an Angel now, I keep picturing like Anthony Rendon kind of stuff.
Ugh. So do the Angels re-sign him? I don't see him going back to Anaheim
anymore. I don't think so. I think he's
Giants or Mariners.
I hear a lot of Mariners, and actually, one of our followers, Dan, mentioned, he said book it right now. He's going to Seattle.
That would look good. I mean, that's a young team with Teoscar coming off the books. They've got. Do you know how many people go to Seattle Mariners games? No. They have one of the most underrated fan bases. Like, I got to pull this up, but MLB attendance. I was looking at 2000 and 2001. You know, the years that they were really good. They led the league with 3.5 million.
That was Ichiro rookie year, wasn't it?
2001, but 2001, 2000. I think even in 2000.
2000, they hosted the All-Star game.
Okay, but that doesn't really impact attendance because that doesn't get included in your yearly.
But there's excitement behind it, maybe.
Oh, for sure. This year they've averaged 31,753 through earlier today. That doesn't include tonight's game, but that's a really good fan base. I mean, they would support him just as if any other big market team. I think Seattle Mariners market kind of gets lost because it's in the West Coast, Pacific Northwest. But I think that they could afford him. They'd get a ton of money because Seattle's a big Asian market too, right? Yes. Like with Ichiro. So that would be a great landing spot for him. Now, the other question I have for you, without him pitching the rest of the year, does this ruin his MVP potential, or do you still think he's the MVP?
I still think he's MVP. So the qualifiers for MVP is Ohtani, Seager, and J-Rod. And
Luis Robert, too.
Luis Robert's in there? Oh,
so by WAR,
the list I have here doesn't have, it has Marcus Semien and Bobby Witt, but doesn't have Robert or Robert Jr.
So by FWAR in the AL, 6.5 for Shohei, 5.4 for Julio, and then Luis Robert is third in the AL at 5.1. The next would be Bobby Witt at 4.9. It doesn't have Corey Seager on here because he doesn't have enough qualified at bats because he's been hurt twice. But he would probably be ahead of Julio.
Corey Seager, the note I'm seeing here, he doesn't qualify for the leaderboards because of the injury, but his total offensive production nearly replicates Ohtani's numbers.
Okay, let me change my
your filter
standards, my filters.
Corey Seager's hitting an absurd clip, hitting 9 home runs in August with a .330 batting average.
He's batting .342 on the season, .406, .641, but he's only played in 89 games. So he's got the same WAR as Luis Robert, but in 27 less games.
Who did we just talk about that won Cy Young and MVP, but in a shortened season?
It was Rick Sutcliffe.
Rick Sutcliffe.
but he didn't win the MVP. He was fourth in the MVP vote.
Right.
But won the Cy Young. So I agree with you. I still think it's Shohei. He's a 1.1 F-WAR over the next best in the American League. He's actually the third best hitter right now. And that's another topic. So while we're on the MVP topic, we had this discussion a couple weeks ago between Freddie and Acuña, but we've got to add a third name, and I think the name we're adding might be the front runner right now.
That's what I'm reading too. He is the front runner, and that's Cody Bellinger.
For those of you who haven't noticed, Mookie Betts is now the betting favorite and most likely the favorite to win the NL MVP. Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts, Michael Burns? Let me redo that. This is for social media, for those of you listening on YouTube. We're not even going to edit this part out. So, NL MVP, who do you have right now?
In my heart, it's still Ronald Acuña Jr. The guy he hits a single, but he's still second base, and it turns into a double. He turned another base hit by the guy hitting behind him in the Braves lineup, because that's going to happen. It's a run. It's an automatic run if Ronald Acuña Jr. gets on base.
Okay. I'm close to on that. So Mookie Betts batting .314, .408, .612 slug. Ronald Acuña, .335, .417, but .570 slug. So Mookie's slugging more because Mookie's got 7 more home runs. Mookie has scored 7 less runs. Acuña has 119 runs. Mookie has 112. But Mookie's driven in 94 from the leadoff spot.
I feel like, is Mookie just not getting the attention because Freddie was overshadowing him to start the year? Or why is it so quiet?
Of Freddie's in the chance for this too. You know, Freddie just hit his 50th double. It's a record for most doubles. 50th in franchise. I think it's the Dodgers franchise record. August. It's August. He's going to hit 60 freaking doubles.
In the month of August, he's hitting 370, 425, 539, 40 hits. And in August, 15 doubles.
Freddie?
Yes.
Yeah, it's insane. And then Mookie, since the All-Star break, is hitting 395, 472, 669. Remember we were talking about J-Rod? 192 WRC plus? Mm-hmm. Mookie's 210.
Oh, my God. I don't know if you can tell. I closed my eyes there because in anticipation of that. 210, you said?
210. So that means he's 110% better than the average baseball player since the All-Star break. His strikeout percentage since the All-Star break, 13.9. His walk percentage, 11.7. He's got a 472 OBP, 10 bombs, 40 runs, 32 driven in, 13 doubles. So he's got 23 extra base hits since the All-Star break. That's a month and 2 weeks.
I never thought that Acuña had it. We're going to lose it. I thought it was his to win. Freddie, when we talked about Freddie, it was like, oh yeah, Freddie's getting close, but Acuña's still going to pull it out. Now all the notes I keep scrolling through here is Betts is the front runner and Acuña is behind him by a significant margin.
So on FanDuel Sportsbook, as I look at it now, of course there's different shops, there's different books, there's going to be different odds, but I like to go to FanDuel because they're probably the more consistent betting site. Ronald Acuña is still the favorite at -150, but Mookie is +110. And as I said that, Acuña just went down to 140. So that makes him closer to Mookie than the -150. And then Freddie Freeman is at +2,000. And Matt Olson, who's going to have 50 pumps this year. Matt Olson's going to hit 50 home runs and not even get close to a top 3 vote.
Nope.
Because Freddie, and guess what? They all play each other tomorrow. The 4-game series between, and our boy Smooth is going to be there. So Justin, have fun. Go bring home a W for your Braves. But yeah, Acuña, Betts, and Freeman. Those numbers. I mean, the numbers here that you're seeing on your screen are ridiculous. Here's the thing. I know WAR is not the end all be all, but it generally tells you
heavy weight.
It generally tells you who is the more important player to a team and who brings a more likelihood to bring wins, right? Wins above replacement. How many wins does he add to your team? Mookie's at 7.5. Freddie Freeman is second in all of baseball at 6.6. And then Acuña is at 6.5.
7.2.
7.5.
7.5?
7.5, 6.6, 6.5. It goes Mookie, Freddie, Acuña.
And Mookie has played outfield, second base, shortstop.
And shortstop. So he's providing more value there because he's adding in different spots on the field. I've heard that people are discounting Freddie because he's a first baseman, but he's a Gold Glove first baseman.
So who's your take? Who's your bet from here on August 30th?
If you're giving me Mookie's number just changed as I look at it now. It's now plus 105. I would bet Mookie at plus 105 because to me, you've got a much better chance at making money. And Corbin Carroll almost just robbed a home run. He robbed it. He caught it, but it was not over the fence from Jason Hayward, of all people. I'd be betting Mookie. If you can find plus money on Mookie, there's a lot of value there. But a month ago, Mookie was plus 600. Now he's plus 100, and in some spots, he's a minus player. Minus means you pay more to win $100. So plus 105 right now, you're making $1.05 on every dollar that you pay. For Acuña, for every $1.40 that you pay, you only win $1 back.
Now, look at it this way. Where would the Dodgers be without Mookie? Do they have this great second half run without Mookie?
No, without either him or Freddie.
Well, I don't him think or Freddie. So individually, if you just remove just Mookie, but you keep Freddie,
they're good, but they're not. They're not
it's a huge
what they
hole.
are.
Where I think the Braves. I mean, this isn't trying to discount the player necessarily, but if you move Acuña, the Braves are still pretty damn good.
Oh, there's not a hole in the Braves lineup. Right. I don't think.
So that's kind of a hard comparison.
Here's my comparison. Acuña was out the year they won the World Series. Right?
He just had unbelievable runs with
I'm not
and Jorge.
Saying,
but yeah, I know what you're saying.
I was fully on board with the Acuña's going to win MVP a month ago, 2 months ago. I tried to make the argument for Freddie a couple weeks ago because of what Freddie was doing. But Mookie, he's doing it all. He's going to be a Gold Glover in right field. He probably wins the Gold Glove over Acuña. Because did you see Acuña's mishap in outfield? Oh, and speaking of Acuña, we'll get to him even more here in a later. But I mean, he's not as sound defensively as I think Mookie is. Mookie just overall, by defensive war.
I've had conversations with Braves fans who wonder if Acuña's flashiness could get in the way.
See, I don't think people take that into consideration. So I'm looking at FanGraphs. They've got a defense and an offense. I don't know how it all adds to the WAR, but when you look at defense, out of the players with the highest WAR, Mookie is a 0.1. Shohei is a minus 14. Acuña is a minus 9.7. So what that's saying is Acuña is more of a negative on defense because Julio's a 6.6, Luis Roberts a 9.1. When I click on defense to give you the best defense, Jonah Heim is the best, Sean Murphy. So I think this weighs more towards catchers because they impact the game more. Because the first four are all catchers, and then Dansby Swanson is number 7, which just tells you how great Dansby's been. And then number 8 is Cal Raleigh. And then Francisco and Bobby Witt. So even Javier Baez is its 12th at defensive at 11.6.
Hey, he's positive somewhere.
So Ronald Acuña defensively is hurting the team, and I think that's where he's losing value. So if I'm giving a vote right now, I'm saying Mookie. I do think what Acuña's doing is incredible. I mean, the dude's going to have a 30-60 season by the end of the weekend, most likely. He's going to hit a pump against the Dodgers. So he's at 29-60.
That's kind of like then Luis Arias. You're like, Luis Arias is a great player because he's hitting near 400, which is now like 350. But is he really that great? Is Luis Arias, just because he hits singles, Do you want is he a great player that you want on your team as a difference maker in your team? I don't think so.
Yeah, if you removed Ronald, I think you're still winning as many games.
What I meant is Acuna is a difference maker. For a guy like what we're talking about here is basically Mookie has the 5 tools. Acuna is missing that one tool of the fielding.
Right now, I think he could be a Gold Glover. Has he won a Gold Glove before? I don't know. I have to look at that. But he's got the potential. I just don't think he's been the better defensive player this year. And I think if you're going to stack him up offensively, they're almost even, in my mind, offensively. And then I lean towards Mookie because he's been the more consistent and better defensive player overall and all around.
No Gold Gloves.
Speaking of no Gold Gloves, I think he'll win one at some point. I think Mookie's probably going to win it this year. That would be my guess out in right field. Because now it's not an outfield award, it's a positional award. It used to be they would normally just take all center
field. Mookie's a 6-time Gold Glove.
There you go. So he provides more when it comes to fielding. So a guy who I want to talk about, also an MVP in the past, Mr. Bryce Harper. He's had a hell of a month of August. He hit another home run today, 300th career home run, Bryce Harper. Huge moment, bottom of the 8th, puts the team up. The Phillies would go on to lose the game. Sorry, Phillies fans. But Bryce Harper is finally looking like Bryce Harper. I think he's finally feeling like himself.
Bryce Harper always comes through in the second half. Always. He is Mr. August/September. I feel like he always picks it up, and you wonder if he rushed it back a little bit with that elbow. Because he would hit, but he didn't hit for power. And these home runs he's hit the last 3 days are missiles. I mean, they don't leave the camera. Usually if a home run, goes up into the sky, these things are piss rockets, dude.
They are nuts. He's been the 5th most valuable player in baseball in the month of August coming into today. So Fangraphs doesn't include the statistics, but he just hit his 10th home run this month. He's coming into today batting .366, .455, slugging .774. That is ridiculous. That's second best to only Mookie Betts in the month of August. Mookie, you read Freddie Freeman's stats in August? I want to read you Mookie Betts's. .452, .509, .808.
808 slugging?
808 slugging. So that's a 1317 OPS. 1.317. Where Bryce's is .455, .774. So that's quick math, 50. That's 80 points less. And he's got the second best in baseball. And then Julio, Marcell Ozuna from the Braves, and Adam Duvall, who just won an AL Player of the Week. But Harper's been the second best slugger in the league in the month of August behind Mookie. I think he's carried the Phillies, but I would say he's carried the Phillies. But have you seen what the Phillies have done this month?
Trey Turner.
Not only Trey Turner, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber's got 10 home runs this month. You see that they're going to finish. So today they hit 3 more home runs. They don't play the rest of the month because August 31st. The team finished with 59 home runs in the month of August. That is the second most ever by a NL team in any month ever. You know who they're behind?
No, I don't.
The Atlanta Braves from June, who hit 61. So the 2 most homer months ever in MLB history, or NL League history, came this year by the NL East leading Braves and the second team in the NL East, the Phillies. But 59 home runs this month. You had Harper with 10. You had Schwarber with 10. I think Castellanos had 8. I think Turner had 6 or 7. Then you had Stott and Bohm. They're putting home runs out left or right. And that Phillies team's a force to be reckoned with because they've got a pretty sneaky good rotation with Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola.
Taijuan Walker's been sneaky good since...
Yeah, Taijuan Walker. You got Michael Lorenzen, and then your 5th starter is Ranger Suarez, who has World Series experience.
Spot starter do pretty well too. Christopher, CRIS, Christopher.
Yeah, we'll just call him Christopher. But that Phillies team, we're hoping that they have a good weekend this weekend as Cubs fans.
They're playing the Brewers?
Yeah, they're playing the Brewers.
Yeah, so call Bryce Harper Mr. August.
Mr. August?
He hits, in every other month, he hits under 300, except in August in his career. He's hitting 304 with 65 career home runs in the month of August. No other month does he have 60. Close, and 56 in March and April, but...
Well, you saw who he hit his home run for yesterday, right?
Like, who he hit it for?
Yeah.
What do you mean for?
Have you not seen the story? It's the funniest freaking thing in the world.
No.
He hit it for Chuck.
For Chuck, huh?
Yeah, Chuck. It's a listener of one of the radio stations in Philadelphia that Bryce was listening to. He goes, I was listening to the radio. I don't know, WEWS or something like that. He goes, I listen every time. And Chuck called in, and he's a fired up Philly fan, and I love him. He calls in almost every day. I listen almost every day. And I walked into the locker room yesterday, and I said, I'm going to hit this one for Chuck. And boy, did he hit one for Chuck. He had a 116-mile-per-hour laser rocket to right center field. But, yeah, the Phillies... That Phillies team, you picked them to win the World Series. I picked the Mariners to win the World Series. Both the teams we picked have had a hell of an August. The best records in baseball in the month of August, or really, I'm going back through the All-Star break. The Dodgers have the same amount of wins coming into tonight. If they win tonight, they'll have more wins than the Mariners. But they both have 31 wins. You know who's in third since the All-Star break?
In third is the Mariners.
No, the Cubs are in third.
Oh, excuse me.
The Seattle Mariners are in second. The Cubs are 29-15 since the All-Star break, tied with the Orioles, and then I believe fifth is the Astros since that point. But very fun stuff there. You see that on the graphic on the side of your screen. But yeah, the Phillies I think are a team to be reckoned with if they're going to make the playoffs at this point. I think they've got a pretty good shot. They're going to have to go on an epic collapse over the next couple of weeks to not make the playoffs. But they're hitting well. Kyle Schwarber's got the potential to be the first player to have 40 home runs and a negative WAR in a season. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. Yes.
That's sad and sucks. I love Kyle. But so the Phillies, they're playing the Brewers this weekend. The Brewers just came off of a big series with the Chicago Cubs. I know we're going long on this podcast, but I want to talk about this real quick. Cubs and Brewers, I think this was a big series. We saw a lot out of the Cubs here in the last 2 days, pitching-wise. Between Justin Steele and Kyle Hendricks, your two best pitchers at this point. But this was a huge series for the Cubs because now they head on to Cincinnati, and I'll be at 2 of the 4 games this weekend because they've got a doubleheader on Friday. But what do you think that this does for the Cubs? They're still 3 games back in the division, but what do you think of the series as a whole, and what do you think the series meant altogether?
I think the Brewers were a team that were recognized as a playoff contender, a good team. And the Cubs came in and said, we can compete with these good teams. We're not just going to beat up on bad teams. We can not only beat you, but we can shut you down. We can win these close ball games. We're not single layered. We're multi-layered. We've got the bullpen. We've got the starters to be able to compete the entire ball game. And what I love about the Cubs right now is it's back to like the 2015-16 where if the Cubs go down early, I still have faith that they're going to score in the late innings.
That's how I felt on Monday, and they were getting shut down by Wade Miley, and they lost, I think, ultimately 6-2. I had bet the over 8.5, so I was kind of upset there was not another run. It looked good, 6 runs in the first 2 innings. I was like, oh, cash that money.
Easy money.
But they just beat the Brewers' 2 best pitchers, Burns and then Woodruff, on back-to-back days. They only scored, a total of 4 runs between those 2 games? But they only gave up a total of 2 runs in those 2 games. They shut out them. They got some help from the weather because that wind was howling in today. But still, I mean, that's a big win, and I think that this is a huge series in Cincinnati. And what I also want to say with the Cubs is by winning 2 out of the 3, I think they're tied in the season series with the Brewers in games 1 apiece. Because I think they've got the same amount because they played a 3-game, a 4-game, and a 3-game, and they end the season in Milwaukee. So they've got a potential to take the tiebreaker, which would be head-to-head. Since they're tied right now, they need to win the series in Milwaukee to end the season, but that puts them in a spot to hold the tiebreaker. And if you go in and win 3 out of 4 in Cincinnati, you gain a game on the. Well, you not gain a game, but you extend your lead on the Reds by 2 games.
Right. I think being 3 games back and 4 games back, it's only 1 game, but I think it's a big difference.
It's a different hill to climb. And if the Cubs win 4 out of if the Cubs were to sweep this weekend in Cincinnati, they will hold the tiebreaker over the Reds as well. So that's going to be a huge series in Cincinnati. I think the Cubs win 3 out of 4. The one thing that scares me is the starting pitching. They do have Jordan Wicks, who got called up this past weekend. What a performance. Right. Rookie debut. First 3 batters, I was shitting my pants.
Yes, it was. I mean, the second pitch of the game when it went over, and then he couldn't locate. It's like he was scared, oh my gosh, are these major leaguers going to put the ball over that easily?
Yeah. And then Brian Reynolds. Brian Reynolds hit a 100+ mile per hour rocket on the second batter of the game, and then he walked McCutchen. And from there, 15 up, 15 down, and 9 strikeouts. So, like, a hell of a debut. That's what the Cubs have been missing for years, is a starting pitcher other than Justin Steele that they've developed, right? Like, that's been the knock on the Theo era. You never developed any pitching, and they finally have developed 2 starters, potentially, and Alzolay, who's not your closer. So we could talk Cubs all day, and maybe we'll do a podcast down the road, and maybe even next week. Strictly Cubs-related. Sorry.
Ben Brown's almost ready. Cade Horton could come up and compete right now.
So real quick, make a quick prediction. PCA up or down in September?
Down.
You don't think he comes up in September?
No.
Matt Mervis come up?
I actually think Canario could come up.
You think Canario? So there's 2 spots. For those of you who don't know, starting tomorrow, September 1st, rosters can expand from 26 to 28. Only one of them can be a pitcher. The other one has to be a player of the infield, whether it's an infield, outfielder, whatever. You have to bring up 1 position player, 1 pitcher if you're going to bring up players. You can't bring up more than 1 pitcher. I think that at some point they bring PCA up, maybe late September. It depends on how Iowa's doing, because I think Iowa's got a shot at the playoffs. I think you want to get him playoff experience every day, at-bats, but you bring him up once that season's done to get him experience in the big leagues and potentially have him as an everyday starter next year. The arms are the question mark for me. Who's the arm you're going to bring up?
Ben Brown's supposed to throw bullpen this weekend.
But is he on... He's not on the 40-man.
I don't think so. But he was in the conversation to bring up for
I think since
Wicks.
they brought Wicks up, we're not going to see Ben Brown. You've got Brad Boxberger coming off the IL. You've got Birdie coming off the IL. And Hughes coming off the IL. Those are 3...
Hughes is coming.
As a lefty, that's the guy that they leaned on to be their lefty at the start of the season. And I think he's got a fresh arm. If he's healthy, there's your secret weapon in the playoffs or in the late end of the season, a lefty reliever that they haven't had. They don't have a lefty reliever. They've got Drew Smyly and Mark Leiter Jr. Mark Leiter Jr. is a right-hand pitcher.
Yeah, I'm looking up how Cade Horton pitched tonight for Double A.
I was watching part of it.
Against the Shuckers. He went 5 innings, 7 Ks, only 3 hits. With only 1 walk.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe he might be starting next year.
He will be starting next year. It's just when. But
so 2 things I want to touch on real quick, and then there's one more thing I really want to dive into. Clayton Kershaw just made history last night. 209th career win, but 209th career win with the Dodgers, which ties him with Don Drysdale for the second most in Dodgers franchise history, which is a huge feat. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is Ronald Acuña. We already touched on a lot of his statistics earlier, but I want to give him his flowers. First player to steal 60 bases in a season since D. Gordon did it. I think it was 2017 the last time. He's most likely going to get 80. I think he could get 20 in the next month. He'll get to 70. That's for sure. He's going to have a 35-70 season in my mind. He's going to hit another 6 home runs. If he has a hot month, he could hit up to 40. If he goes 40-40, he'll win the MVP.
Oh, if he went 40-40, absolutely.
Yeah, but that means he's got to hit 11 more home runs, and I don't see him hitting 11 home runs in the month of September. But crazier things have happened. But the thing I really wanted to talk about, more news that came out last week. I believe it was last week, Thursday, it dropped. Steven Strasburg is going to be announcing his retirement, I believe, on September 9th. So my question to you, again, I'm not editing this week. Yeah, I just hit I'm animated. I'm animated about this topic. So Steven Strasburg is likely to retire. He's going to announce his retirement. I believe they're talking September 9th as they're going to have the press conference. So Steven Strasburg, number 1 overall pick, 2009. Do you think he was a bust?
No. He came out, he shoved, when healthy, the dude, I mean, looking at 2000, he came up in 2010. Mm-hmm. 2012 was his first full season, 159 innings. Dude had nearly 200 strikeouts for 3 consecutive years. When he was healthy, he was a force. It's just the nature of pitching. It'd be, for me, if a pitcher has, like Madison Bumgarner, 4 great years, he was still great. Tim Lincecum, he didn't ride off. Tim Lincecum was great. Steven Strasburg was great.
So they paid him $200+ million, and he's made 8 starts since then.
Yeah, that's harsh. That's hard. But you kind of look at that like they shouldn't have done that.
Right. I think they were trying to make right. He was the World Series MVP for a team that won the World Series in 2019, right? Like the lasting image should be him holding the trophy rather than the struggles he's had on the mound in I think he's thrown like 31 innings since he got hurt or since he got the contract in 8 starts, and he's had like an ERA over 10 in those 8 starts combined. I hate that that's how we're seeing Strasburg. I just think he had more hype around him than any starting pitcher since Mark Pryor coming out of the draft. Don't you think?
Right. He was one of the first guys to ever have the talks that he would skip all be drafted and go right to the major leagues. It's the first time I'd ever heard of that.
He didn't do it, but he was close because he came up a year later after he got drafted. And I remember that debut. I think he struck out 10 players, 10 batters. I mean, it was a hell of a debut. He had a 2.91 ERA in his first season in 2010. He only pitched 24 innings in 2011 because I think he had surgery, didn't he? Didn't he get hurt? 24 innings, but he had a 1.5. In his career, a 3.24 in 1,470 innings. And out of that, he had 1,723 strikeouts. And that's just in his record, 113 and 62. Like you said, he was an ace when he was here, when he was healthy. In 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
And 19. He won. 19 was his most win year. Yeah, 18 and 6, 209 innings, the most innings he's ever thrown. So you got to think that he's the most strikeouts he's had in a year. So do you blame the Nationals for giving that contract? I mean, he was...
No, I mean
that's the year. You thought he was past it.
Yeah, he had been healthy. He had thrown more than 130 innings in 4 straight seasons. He'd only thrown 250. See, I'm having a hard time getting past the word bust because he was built up to be he was built up to be the next generation's Nolan Ryan, right?
Bryce Harper.
Well, they back-to-back drafts, number 1 overall, both 09 and 2010. It went Strasburg and then Harper, 09 and 10. But to the same team, no less. But
do they win the World Series without him?
No, they don't. He was the MVP.
MVP, of course.
I mean, the World Series MVP. I just saw a statistic the other day. He has the best ERA amongst pitchers in Major League Baseball who have pitched in 50 innings or more in the playoffs. Postseason career statistics. His ERA in 55 in a third inning, 1.46. The next best player, Madison Bumgarner, 2.11. He had double the innings. And then Kurt Schilling, El Duque, Orlando Hernandez, and then John Smoltz and Dave Stewart. Those are your 6 best players regarding ERA all time.
Take out Strasburg's last 3 years. Let's say after 2019, he retired. He didn't sign a new contract. Is he still a bust?
No. I think it's the injuries the last couple of years, and he can't control the injuries. So I guess you're right.
So take out Chris Bryant's Colorado history. Is
No,
Chris
he's still
Bryant
a
a
bust.
bust? He's still a bust.
Not for the Cubs. Not for the Cubs.
No, right. That's what I'm
Because
saying. Take out the Colorado. Say just his 7 years was Chris Bryant a bust with the Cubs.
He won a Rookie of the Year. He won MVP. He should have won another MVP in 2017 because he had the stats that were better than 16. Then he got hurt. Not a bust, but he wasn't what he was supposed to be. And that's what I'll say about Strasburg. He wasn't a bust, but he did not. I think he was billed to be more than he ended up being. I think when he was healthy, he was him, but he was never healthy.
8
So I guess
years of great pitching Strasburg had, I'd say. 8 years.
8.5. I would take. So 2015, he was good, but I think he got hurt. 127 innings.
Okay.
In 2015.
So
did he ever win a Cy Young? I don't think he ever
did
won a
not
Cy
win
Young.
a Cy Young. He only finished 3 times in the top 9.
Yeah, so that's another thing. You expect him to be a Cy Young award winner. He's not a Hall of Famer, right?
He's not.
You draft him number 1 overall, you think he's a Hall of Famer. You know who's going to be a Hall of Famer in that draft?
In 2010?
2009.
2009? Manny Machado? That was later. Just kidding.
That was the next year. That was 2010. Some guy named Michael Nelson Trout.
Yeah.
Who was drafted 25th, I believe.
Trout and Harper weren't in the same draft?
Harper was the next year.
Okay.
But they came up in the same season, I believe.
Right, yes.
Yeah, the 2009 MLB draft. I will say, Dustin Ackley, I think, went number 2 to the Mariners. He turned out to be... so get this. Okay, here we go. Top 7 picks in the 2009 draft. Steven Strasburg, Dustin Ackley. He went to the Mariners. The San Diego Padres drafted Donovan Tate out of Cartersville High School.
Never heard of him.
No clue. The Pittsburgh Pirates drafted catcher Tony Sanchez. Never heard of him.
He played for the Pirates for a little bit.
Did he?
Yeah.
Baltimore Orioles drafted Matt Hobgood, a right-handed pitcher out of high school. Nothing. Number 6 to the San Francisco Giants, Zach Wheeler. Number 7.
He's pretty good.
Number 7, Atlanta Braves drafted Mike Minor. Number 8,
good.
the Reds drafted Mike Leake. Now, Wheeler and Minor have been all-stars. Number 9, the Tigers drafted Jacob Turner. And then the Nationals drafted at 10, Drew Storen, who was a pretty decent reliever for a while there. Other all-stars that have been drafted behind him, Aaron Crow at 12, 17, A.J. Pollock, Shelby Miller at 19, Kyle Gibson 22, and Mike Trout at 25. Really, that's it. James Paxton at 37, Brad Boxberger at 43, and those are really the only other real notable names. Until you get to the second round, and then you've got Nolan Arenado, second round, 59th overall, and then that's about it from there.
So would you, if you would go back and you were the Nationals, would you take Nolan Arenado over Steven Strasburg, number 1 overall?
I'd take Mike Trout.
Oh, that wasn't. Yes, of course.
That wasn't part of the deal. Would you take Nolan? I think yes. But you had, I think Rendon was on the team at that point. But still, you're not drafting a third base.
It's not
You're
like
not
football.
not drafting.
It's not like football, right?
Right. I don't know. He's going to go into the Nationals Hall of Fame. He deserves it.
Yes.
He's a National. He was great when he was healthy. I just don't think he gave them enough health when he was
Mark Pryor. Mark had that hype and hope that this was the future, and of
there
course
it is.
Strasburg had more than Pryor did.
Yeah. Well, congrats to Steven Strasburg on a good career. I wouldn't call it an amazing career, but it's a good enough career. I liked him. I loved watching him pitch. I'm sad because we're not going to get to see it again, because when he did pitch, like he said, he was a stud. And that's going to take us into our power rankings this week. As I've mentioned at the top of the show, our power rankings are brought to you by 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. This is all a YouTube exclusive. It only drops on Mondays. You've got the link if you haven't watched it yet. It's in here, right here at the top, but also you can find it in the description below. That is 10thmountainwhiskey.com. So 10thwhiskey.com. Use promo code BNB for 10% off your order. You can also find the link to the YouTube video. So, Mikey, let's get us through our top 10 power rankings this week. Who do you have at number 10? Let's list them off real quick. Are you going to do evens, odds, or are you just going to give the first 7 and make people go find the other 3?
I'm just going to give you my 10, and it's the Cubs.
Oh, number 10. I thought you were saying number 1 Cubs, number 2 Cubs, number 3 Cubs.
No, I'm just giving you my number 10. That's all you're getting. You're not getting 9 through 1. You're just getting number 10 for the Cubs.
I'm going to give you my number 10. It's the Cubs. And then I'm going to give you number 5. It's the Mariners. But go check out our final top 10 power rankings through the link in the description. You can even find that description on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're streaming us, or on YouTube here if you're watching. If you are, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Coming up, we talked about it. We teased about it earlier. Michael and I are hopefully going to be hugging and shaking hands in person next week.
Why'd you guys go like that? Why couldn't you say, me and Michael are going to a Cubs game together? You had to say hugging.
Yeah, I'm going to get to hug you. I haven't hugged you since February. I haven't seen you since February when we were in Nashville. But we're going to go at our first Cubs game together. We're going to go to 2, hopefully. And then
I've never been to the bleachers.
He's never been to the bleachers, so I'm going to introduce him to the bleachers. And also, we're probably going to be able to podcast in person, and we may have something up our sleeves for next week regarding that as well. So look out for more content from us over the next week and a half or so, as we're going to be in person at Wrigley Field. There's going to be a lot of bourbon. We've got several bottles of bourbon to sample review that has been sent to us that will be popped open next week. So go check us out on YouTube at Barrels and Barrels Pod, Instagram, Facebook at Barrels and Barrels Pod, and TikTok at Barrels and Barrels Pod. X, which is formerly Twitter, at Barrels and Barrels. Email us, barrelsandbarrels@gmail.com. Don't forget to go to whiskeytowers.com. Use promo code WhiskeyWeather. Also, head on over to Memento, the app. Download it. Use the code Bourbon Baseball, all lower cases. That'll get you as a beta user of the Memento app, which I think you're going to love. And if you do love it, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the app. And then also, don't forget, whiskey at 10thwhiskey.com. 10% off your order. Use promo code capital BNB for 10% off your order. We are on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, and iHeartRadio podcasts. We'd love to hear your thoughts about our podcast. What do you like? What don't you like? Leave the review. Please hit the review button. Let us know. And if you like what we're doing, or if you don't like, we're going to read all reviews that get put out on our podcast. So we'd love to hear
I would love some hard critiques. Love it.
Who did we get hard critique? Kyle gave us some hard critique the other day. I don't remember what it was. I'm going to have to ask him later. Kyle Rhodes, our old buddy Kyle Rhodes. So thank you to Kyle for listening. But we'll talk more about all of that if you do leave us any reviews. I am Brandon. That's Michael. Thanks for joining us on this hour and probably 40-minute ride of Barrels and Barrels, a Bourbon and Baseball podcast. We hope you enjoyed everything. I think we had an amazing discussion. Thank you again for joining in. We are Barrels and Barrels, a Bourbon and Baseball podcast. High proof, high heat. Next week, it's going to be in person. There's going to be a little bit more minutia and differences to the podcast, but I still think we're going to be able to bring you amazing stuff next week. So thank you for listening. Tune in next week and on our Facebook, Twitter, all the stuff. We've got graphics going out. We've got shorts on YouTube. So go check us out there. Michael Burns, do you have anything else for our friends, families, viewers, listeners, passerbys?
Before I carry us out here, glasses, hats. This is a comfy Richardson 112, white. We're
gonna be repping it together in the bleachers next week.
Gray heathered on the front, not just gray heathered on the front.
Freddie Freeman just hit a bomb. Oh, that went 20 rows deep into right field. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nope, just talking about our swag here. Glasses,
that's right.
Hats, shirts, stickers. If you want to stick a sticker in your local brewery or something on the urinal wall, that works great. We appreciate
we gotta buy
that.
More stickers. I gotta order more stickers.
But after that,
one sticker.
Brandon, any other final words for us?
Let's go Cubbies.
Let's go.
Let's go.